Chris Knight. This is the Real Review 3000. And we are doing the Gospel According to Chris here with Merry Mayhem, the Mistress of Mayhem. Mary, why don't you tell everybody really quick what you're about, where you're from, or not where you're from, but, where they can find you, all that fun stuff.
Well, hi, guys. I am Mary B. I am the Mistress of Mayhem, disruptor of the narrative, and official Whammon card holder. You can find me over on my channel, Merry Mayhem. I believe, is the link in the description? No, it is not.
No, it's not today, and I totally forgot. Thank you for reminding me. I believe you can put your...
I can. I'll pull up my page and throw a link up in the chat here in just a minute. But yeah, I'm sorry. I know that it's on loop, guys, and that I'm essentially not really, like, I'm here, obviously, but there's my green screen is showing a loop of me talking because I am in the process of trying to get ready for 1,000,001 things right now. So I'm just not going to be on camera. So this is the second best thing, me yapping my mouth, right?
Yeah. No, so, speaking of that, I know how that is to be on the run all the time. Not for the same reasons. First off, congratulations on Geeks and Gamers. Congrats. Congrats on your sub count. I think it's like in the 2,600s now, is it?
2,700 and climbing.
I mean, you're going to be ready for this. Just remember to breathe. But because you're on a schedule, because I'm on a schedule, we move some stuff around just so we can get you on. And I appreciate your taking the time to do this. Let's talk. Let's get it going. We're going to have a shortened version, about 45 minutes, guys. So we're going to rush through this.
How is that possible? Chris Knight doing a 45-minute live stream?
No, when I first started, I think my first 6 or 7 were 2 hours.
Yeah, dude. Even more at points. Like, you are a chatter.
I am.
This is brilliant. Like, I'm going to hold you to it, though. At the 45-minute mark.
I'm watching the timer right up there at the top. Honestly, that's a great thing about StreamYard is you can see that timer up there. So we're at 2 minutes and 6 seconds right now. Let's talk. First off, let's talk about what got Merry Mayhem into Star Wars. Who was it, or was it just you into the prequels, something like that? What was it that got you into Star Wars?
So this has been something that I've kind of shared on several streams at this point. I did it with Anna, and I did it with my mods, my mod brothers Hanstar and Mox Rocks over on their channel. I've been no bones about it. I got into Star Wars when I was little, before I can even remember, really, because my father was such a big fan of the original movies, and they were some of the few movies that we actually owned, and so they were things that we watched together on a regular basis, and he was always so excited about it, and it was always something that he was always enthusiastic for. So I would sort of sit on his lap, and he would explain to me what was going on in the movies, and that's Luke Skywalker, and that's Yoda, and you could, when you're excited for something because your parents are excited for it, so you get the impression that you should be as well, because this is important to them, and so because this is important to them, this is important to you. I grew up on that, and then as I grew older, I began to really sort of imbibe the lessons and the things that were being said in these movies, and I learned to really have this sort of great respect for Luke Skywalker, and it's just sort of that's where it is. It's from before time for me. It's from before I can even remember. And a lot of that is due to my father, and a lot of that is due to my brother. My brother, who, as I grew older and my Star Wars began to change, the prequels came out, and then of course the sequels, and then the games we got into. We used to have sort of these debates with my brother, and it became a tradition to go to all of the Star Wars movies in theaters with my brother, and that was what we did. It was just what we did multiple times. And so, yeah, this is essentially a cornerstone of my life. It's a lot of the character building that took place for me.
Cool. So, I feel the same way about my thing, but we're not going to talk too much about me. I've said it 1,000 times too, but this is about you. When you say, I love how people say this, the prequels, and then we say the sequels, but I always hear, I don't want to say a disdained sound, but everybody handles these sequels a little differently. So let's go on to this. You got into it with your family, with Star Wars. You did that. Why do you think you're so passionate? Is it because of your family, or do you think that passion started with your family, and then as you got into it, you found your own reasons to be passionate about it? Because I think everybody has different reasons for being passionate, even if they were led into it by somebody, a family member. They were born into it. They remember seeing it when they were 7 or whatever, Star Wars when they were 7. there's a lot of different reasons, but why do you think are you passionate about Star Wars? Is it because of your family, or is it just partially because of your family and you have found your own reason for it?
So family is more of a catalyst, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I guess tradition to some extent, because, you know, tradition is important for anybody. You hold on to your traditions and the things that you've done throughout your life that sort of make up the memories that you have, right? So family is certainly the catalyst, and it is certainly important, but it also boils down to the lessons, right? The lessons, because my father, you know, when he first introduced Luke to me, basically introduced him as space Jesus, right? Like, that's space Jesus. That is the pinnacle of hope, the person who's willing to sacrifice themselves and all that they are on the sort of altar of the hope that someone could be redeemed, someone who is irredeemable could be redeemed, and this willingness to trudge forward and persist in the face of all obstacle. And also, you know, Leia was this wonderful female role model for me. She was this strong, empowered woman who nothing held back, and she certainly didn't take any crap from anyone. I used to love Leia. Now, she was secondary to Luke for me because Luke embodied hope, right?
Yeah.
Luke embodied this sort of perseverance, but I loved seeing Leia because Leia really was a good female role model, and she didn't take any crap from anyone. So she was very sassy, and I loved that. I love that word sassy. I know people use it in sort of a derogatory way now when they describe women who are powerful and strong and don't take any shit, as it were. I hope. Am I allowed to use? No,
I'm okay with it. You're okay. Just, you know, let's keep it down though.
Got it. She just didn't take any crap from anybody, right? She never backed down, and so there was this sort of overall amazingness, this overarching amazing story that had a lot to do with the building of the morals and the foundations of my life and who I am as a person. And so, you could say that it is a combination of all of those things, like it is for most people. It's not just one aspect of Star Wars. It's all of the things that it brings to the table, and it's all of the things that makes you feel like you know these people, you know these characters. They've impacted your life, and they've even altered the way that you approach certain things. So yes, Star Wars it's not just any one thing that keeps me so invested. It is all of the little things, all of the little nuances about it that make me so passionate about it and make me just almost desperate for something more, because I feel like there is so much that it's added to my life, and it's almost like being in love. When you can't get enough of something or someone, you feel like there's always more to discover, always more to sort of dig up and unearth about this thing. And so it's one of the reasons why I've been enjoying getting into the expanded universe so much, since Disney has essentially refused to give me my fix.
I say all the time, and I know people have corrected me, and I will put this on a point that this is my personal belief. I believe Disney has totally turned its back towards anything EU or canon that was, except for what they think they can make money off of, because they're doing the Marvel thing where they're handpicking what they want, but then saying, no, the rest of it doesn't count, which works for Marvel because Marvel is a comic property, and comic properties have many different timelines.
Sure.
Up until Disney got a hold of it, Star Wars had a very defined timeline.
Well, I understand, and look, I haven't gotten into the EU as in depth. Like, obviously, I'm just sort of beginning to traverse this area, but as I understand it, there were some things that weren't perfectly lined out, right? But as a whole, it was relatively linear and cohesive and worked for the most part. And so, and those stories were well done, and at least most of them, a lot of them were well done. And so people are feeling a bit shafted when it comes to this stuff, because we had something that worked and worked well, and it was cohesive, and you took it away, and in its place you presented us with something very subpar. And so yes, there's a bit of resentment there. Not a bit, there's a lot of resentment there, because it's held so closely to our hearts.
Absolutely. And guys, really quick, if you're watching, please hit that like button down below. because the more likes, it just means you like Merry Mayhem. Me, on the other hand, don't worry about me.
Well, hey, I mean, like, I'll go ahead and bring it up. So I've been friends with Chris here for, gosh, man, like what, 7-8 months at this point. A long time, and at least in terms of this fandom and how and how long I've been in the community. So I've been a YouTuber for about 10 months, and Chris has been there since basically right towards the very beginning of my getting involved in this. And you're the reason for Panda Suit Mary and that movement.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, you should subscribe to Chris. He has fantastic content, and you should come back and check him out and hit the bell.
I try, please. I do appreciate the endorsement. Thank you very much. Let's go, and you've already mentioned it. I know this personally. We've had conversations about this. We know Luke Skywalker's your favorite.
Yes. Well, okay, so Luke Skywalker was my favorite growing up. Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite character, and you can thank the prequels for that.
Well, and you know what? I'm a big fan with the way Ewan McGregor did Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm a big fan of Alex Guinness. I loved Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's just he was not that influential of a part per se to the whole of the original trilogy. He was a nice.
I would say he was incredibly influential for Luke, obviously.
Yeah, I think.
But in terms of he wasn't a main character, at least in the the Empire and Return of the Jedi.
I think that but I love the fact that we got to learn about his character. So let's talk about these two characters. Let's first talk about Obi-Wan and what it is you like about that. Let's go into the differences that you think about the two actors that have played him, since we have two actors that have played Obi-Wan. What's your opinion of all that?
Well, look, Ewan McGregor was phenomenal as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think he sort of sucked me in at the very beginning with the Phantom Menace and his struggle with what went down with Qui-Gon. You could literally see the shift to the dark side that he had there, right? Like it was portrayed in a way that you felt him. You could see it on his face. And Ewan did a fantastic job in that movie. And he not immediately won me over. Because, it was still just, the Phantom Menace, and it was not a great movie, and it had its problems and all of that jazz, but he was definitely a highlight of that, right? And I could tell right away that I liked this Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then as time went along, he became this sort of snarky, had all kinds of well, another happy landing, he was entertaining to watch, and he had an arc. You knew he was going through an overarching ordeal, right? Mm-hmm. Done initially when we were introduced to with the Qui-Gon stuff, and so this sort of loss of his master, and then being saddled with a Padawan that he himself didn't think should be a Padawan, didn't think should be there. This should not be happening. He's not on board, and he didn't agree with his master. Nevertheless, he's in this situation where he must continue forward for the love of a promise that he made to his dying master. So he needed to do this for the sake of his own promise and the sake of his own word, and something that he was struggling with dealing with because he wasn't prepared, and he wasn't the person that was capable of being the master that Anakin needed. Thank you. I appreciate the cheers. But no, he wasn't the guy, right? And yet he became the guy. And then you see this development of his relationship with Anakin and how he's struggling to try to hold it together. And then by the end of it all, he's become not just fond of this Padawan who he was saddled with, essentially. This is his brother. Someone who is not terribly far off from him in age, someone who he has mentored and done his best and failed, horribly failed, to the detriment of the entire galaxy. And then you move into the original trilogy, where Obi-Wan now has an opportunity to set things right by setting his son, essentially someone who would feel like a nephew to Obi-Wan, down the correct path. You must learn the ways of the Force if you're to go to Alderaan. And the overarching thing was just so deep because Obi-Wan himself as a character has had a life that no one would envy, that no one would want. and yet he stands up to it like a man, and he really owns it. By the way, hi Adritz, I see you in the chat. I'm so glad you're here. Would you like a butterscotch, my dear? Sorry.
Are you turning into a grandma?
I apparently am Adritz's grandmother, so I'll take it. Fine. I've got a butterscotch in my purse for you, dear.
Well, let me go into something here really quick. It's why we're talking about Obi-Wan. Do you think, in any way, shape, or form, does it show in the original trilogy that he saddled with the guilt? That
I think with the context of the original or of the prequel, Jesus God, of the prequel, yes, it flows absolutely perfectly. Without the prequel trilogy, no, obviously you just get and it's enough for the original trilogy. It is enough for you to understand that there's backstory here and there's something deeper going on. And so it does in fact work without the without the prequel trilogy. Lord Jesus, come help me. But I think with the prequels in place, it is absolutely fluid and wonderful. And his story is of all of the characters, I guess, because he spans the entirety of the prequels and the original. His story is the most engrossing for me, because even from death, he feels he must make this wrong right.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, but I constantly get in my head that vision of when he's talking about Darth Vader in the Star Wars, as I like to call it, not New Hope, but where he's sitting in his house and he's talking to Luke, and he thinks the way he looks, his thinking.
Yes,
you can see at times in that movie, and I think Alec Guinness was really good at this. Maybe he had some context. Maybe George Lucas said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a little backstory about who you're playing," and because we know Lucas had the backstory, just not fully developed. But you kind of see it at times that there is a sadness in him that he like. I don't know about lying per se, because like he says, it's all in your point of view. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I want to tell him, but I can't tell him, because then it's gonna mess with what I think.
Well, he's still stuck in that old way of thinking.
Yeah.
Of the original, or the old Republic, right? He's still stuck in the old Jedi Order, and how they were very cryptic at times. Mm-hmm. Absolutely cut corners. And also his master was Qui-Gon Jinn, and so there's context given there as well, where essentially he's like, I shall do what I must, where he keeps things from the Order, and from where he will sort of go down shady paths if he must, in order to accomplish the will of the Force. So I think you can see a little bit of Qui-Gon there in that moment, where absolutely Obi-Wan is willing to fulfill the will of the Force via shady means if it is so necessary. And he filthy liar. I mean, I agree with it. It's from a certain point of view, and maybe that's one of the reasons why. I mean, honestly, that also had an impact on the way that I perceive, how I speak with people. Because there's never a goal to harm anyone, and so you tend to speak to people in ways that won't harm them. So you sometimes you tiptoe, and we all do it, right? Sometimes you tiptoe around things in order to try to make the best of a situation. And that's all he's doing there. He's a human. He's a person. And he's handling things the best way he knows how to reach the outcome that he feels is best. And it's a human way to be. It's very human, very relatable, very understandable. And it's one of the geniuses of George Lucas's writing, I think, that he's able to bring this very human, very relatable character to the screen, and you still love him. You still adore him.
I totally agree with that. I sit there sometimes and I debate whether or not he lied, or if he thought it was just a means to the end, because like you said, the cryptic way is to give them enough information that leads them in the direction. And as they go down that path, as things come up, we will teach them as we go. And I think very much in the first one that Obi-Wan believed at the beginning that he could get through this delivering the plans and everything and he would still be there with Luke. And then as things spiraled and went a different direction, he more and more knew what was going to happen.
We don't know what he knew.
No, we don't.
He'd had plenty of time out there in the desert to do a whole lot of Force and Force stuff, right? So, and we know that Yoda could essentially look towards the future, right? Like, but always in motion, the future is. So we don't know what Obi-Wan knew. All we do know, in fact, is that he was intent upon setting Luke down this path and trying to be a mentor towards him as best as he could, and even from death wouldn't back away from that calling. So he's a lying bastard.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, of course, up until this point was only into 3 films, but now we'll call it 4 and a little bit. Just that.
Well, it depends on how you define Luke Skywalker, because if you define Luke Skywalker as the Luke that we met in episodes 4 through 6, then hashtag not my Luke in episodes 7 and 8.
We won't go into that, because if we go into that and I try to explain my side of that, we know where that's going to
lead.
Yes,
I know.
No, but I mean, I totally understand the not my Luke thing. We'll get into that, but let's talk about Luke from the original trilogy, the path that he went on, the growth that you see in the character, since we're lacking that currently. Let's talk about Luke a little bit. Give me your why Luke was your first favorite.
So I think it boils down to what I said earlier, and that is essentially that he's very relatable in a lot of ways. When you're young and when you're sort of young and dumb and full of fluid, you wind up doing things, pushing yourself in directions that you perhaps aren't prepared to engage in, which is certainly what he did in Empire, right? And he lost his hand for it, right? Mm-hmm. But he never stopped. He never stopped persevering. And I think it was that moment when he lost his hand and he discovers that, Darth Vader is his father, and he is standing there with his sister, and all hope is lost, except what it is that he pursues and never backs down from doing. And you realize that there's a lot of grit in this silly farm boy from Tatooine, right? He's an underdog, and everybody loves an underdog. And he won't back down. He won't stop trying. He pushes himself. And then you discover that what he's pushing himself for isn't even so much the salvation. I mean, it is the salvation of the galaxy, of course. But it is essentially the salvation of his father. Mm-hmm. The father that, and I hearken that back to even Belle, who I've gone on record as saying is my heroine of all heroines. She sacrificed everything for her father. She gave up her own life to, there's an unending, interminable end of servitude to this beast, this monster, in order to save the life of her father.
Yeah.
And that is what Luke did, is he saw someone that he felt was irredeemable and was willing to sacrifice his life for that person if it would be enough to bring him back. And so I felt like that was one of the most admirable traits I'd ever seen in anyone. Sacrificial love to the point where you would lay down your own life for a friend or for someone you cared for, someone who didn't even deserve it. And that pulled me to Luke in such a way as to make it impossible for me to ever let go. Because could there be a greater love? Could there be a better example of love? No, there couldn't.
Let me ask you this. When was the first time you saw Star Wars? How old were you?
I was an infant. My father played these movies before I was old enough to comprehend words. Hmm? I do not remember my first viewing of Star Wars because I was not old enough to be anything other than a drooling, pooping mess.
That's the same thing with me, and I find that interesting because I think getting introduced to it that early is perfect. I think that's what you have to do. I'm just saddened, and again, we'll get to this here in a little bit. I'm just saddened with what current generations have that is passed off as Star Wars. So, I mean, okay, so how old were you, do you think, when you actually picked up on?
I think I went through, so my first memories of it are just of sitting on my dad's lap, and mostly not even the movie so much as it's just him talking, really. My father talking about them. And then the movie's there, it's playing, and I recognize the faces, but I don't really comprehend what's going on in front of me. Only the words that my father said. That's Luke Skywalker. That's the hero. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's his mentor. That's Yoda. That's and just these sort of, my father reiterating to me how important they were, how incredibly essential what they were saying was, before I even understood what it was they were saying. But in terms of my first real memory of absorbing something from Star Wars was from Yoda. And I remember I was just watching it, like, just again, right, for the bajillionth time of my life. And I remember hearing Yoda say, "Do or do not. There is no try." And all of a sudden it hit me what that meant. That at the end of the day, you either did it or you didn't.
Absolutely.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks that my best effort, if it didn't work, wasn't good enough. And it was this sort of try again until you do it thing. And it instilled in me this mentality that you have to keep, if this is something you're going to do, if you've decided I will do this, then you do it. And you keep going until you do it. So it sort of instilled a work ethic in me from a very young age. I was preteen, I think, maybe at this time, 11, 12 years old, when I remember it really hitting me. And I remember taking it forward with me into things where it would almost echo in my mind when I would go to approach something that I really wanted to do, that I was really, really passionate about. I wanted to sing, and I wasn't very good. So I just kept trying. Do what?
I don't believe that.
You should believe that, because it's true.
Well, I mean, I'm joking more than anything. I understand how that is. I'm just saying that's just, it's amazing to think that at one time you felt that way. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't judge myself. But you're very right. The try or do or do not. Try or don't. There's no in between, and that's the truth. There really is. Either you're consistently in a perpetual move to achieve something, or you're not. Mm-hmm. If you're not involved in it, then you're not involved in it. If you are, then you should constantly be working to the effort of completion, whatever that is, and however that is.
That's what she said, giggity. No, it's true. You push yourself forward, and you sometimes you adjust fire, sometimes you alter your course, because of course always in motion the future is, and that in and of itself there's not a problem with that. But if you've determined to do something, you don't give up before you've accomplished the goal. So yeah, that essentially, getting back to the point, that's my first real solid memory of something from Star Wars hitting me like a ton of bricks. And then of course Luke did exactly as Yoda bid him, do or do not. There is no try, right? Mm-hmm. And it was after that I started to sort of pay more attention, I think, to Star Wars and the stuff that was in it. And as I grew older, I began to realize that I'm a geek, and I do not fit in with all the girls around me. So
it's funny, because when I was growing up, Star Wars was where it was. It didn't matter, if you were quote unquote a geek or into that type of thing or not. Star Wars was definitely, and I'm not going to say it was meant for kids, but kids were into it. at least everybody I was around, we all role played in the backyard like we were having lightsaber battles and all that with 2 broomsticks, whatever we had around us. And I've said this 1,000 times. I tried to build the Millennium Falcon out of plywood. I tried. I failed. And that goes back to what you said before. Obviously, I just didn't listen to Yoda. So we're at 30 minutes right now. So let's move to Disney, the sequels, and the Not My Luke. Let's talk about that. First off, Disney, before they took over, when you heard they were taking over, what was your first thought?
I was excited initially. I was very excited because look, I'm a Disney nerd. Okay, so if you want to have a conversation about Disney, I am your girl. I can do that. I was steeped in it from, again, infancy. There were 2 things that I was always exposed to, and that was Star Wars and Disney. And Disney taking over this other thing that I love seemed like a match made in heaven to me. This is going to be perfect. The excitement was beyond real. Okay, like I was at the time I was married to my now ex-husband, and I drove him insane. I drove him absolutely insane. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And he was like, you're an idiot. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I was probably more, I don't think it's possible to have been more excited than I was. I'm not saying there aren't people out there who weren't as excited as I was, but I really don't think it's possible to have been more excited than I was, because it was the marriage of the 2 things that essentially built me, right? In terms of not being directly my mother and my father and my immediate family, as far as media goes, and as far as like influences on your life as a young person, that was it. That right there, Disney and Star Wars, that was it. And so when they're getting married, the baby is going to be beautiful, right? Like it's going to have the bluest eyes you've ever seen in your life. And oh my God, it's going to be the most athletic thing you've ever seen. Like this kid is going to win all the awards, right? That was essentially my mentality. And I walked into that theater with every expectation in the world that it was going to be perfect. And then it dashed all of that. And I was never a fan of The Force Awakens because I have a good grip on what a strong female character looks like. And she doesn't look like Rey.
I was under the impression it was going to be Finn. I was under the impression up until it just about halfway, 3/4 of the way through. I'm like, really? Huh, this is weird.
I thought it was Finn too.
I mean, I doubt it's going to be. I mean, I'm okay with 1,000 different directions this movie could go. I'm just not sure if they're going to.
We'll have to disagree. We'll have to agree to disagree on that one, because there are not 1,000 different directions this movie could go. Rian Johnson killed all those directions, Chris.
Well, okay. We've talked about that. And here's the thing. I don't know if you've read the leaks. I have not. So there's the other side of it. I personally could come up with 1,000 ways that it could go. But that doesn't mean that they see that. And again, I've made no bones about it. I have a different perspective on how I look at these movies than most people. And that doesn't make me right. It just makes me, what would that be, more hopeful, and probably more chances of my hopes being completely dashed and stomped on the floor and all of that. I admit that. I know that. But you see that I'm really surprised, because I don't think The Force Awakens was as bad as The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was not shot like a Star Wars movie. It was it took a lot of liberties.
You're being sweet. You're being generous, but okay.
Well, I mean, it takes a lot of liberties and things like that. And I know you absolutely hate the Luke that is portrayed
with the passion of 1,000 burning suns.
That's nice. That's a good. I have to remember. I have to find a way to use that sometime. So explain that. Explain that hatred. I mean, explain to me exactly where you see they tore apart your Luke.
So, Luke Skywalker, the man who would have willingly laid down his life, threw aside a lightsaber in order to save his father. You're telling me now throws aside a lightsaber to abandon his sister? The f*** is this? That's not Luke. Luke would never do that. And you've never given me context as to why he did. All you said was, oh, he f***ed up with his nephew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Luke wouldn't, look, let's say he screwed up royally with Kylo Ren, right? He just jacked it all up. Luke would have done exactly what Mark Hamill said. He would have gone away for a few months at most. I think he would have gone away for a few months. He would have reevaluated things, and he would have come back swinging. He would have come back doing whatever was required. He would never have abandoned his sister to face this on her own. That's not Luke. And let's say for a second, he would be willing to raise a saber, a laser sword, to his nephew in a moment's weakness. Let's say that were the case, right? I don't believe it, but let's say he were willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that in response to his own failure, the Luke who heard Yoda say, do or do not, there is no try, would have backed down and allowed all of the work that he did to save the galaxy go to waste by the wayside because of a nephew he failed? Is that what you think? And you've never given me a reason to believe he would act any differently, because I have no context for the 30 years between the last movie in canon-wise and now. I have no context for that. You've never given me a single reason to believe Luke would do that. You've assassinated his character, and you won't tell me why.
And that's the problem. That is the absolute thing that I think has caused us divide in fans, is that context. And I always go back to the point that George Lucas specifically said in the first trilogy, on almost every commentary I ever heard, is when on Star Wars especially, I didn't want to give anybody any context. I didn't want to give anybody any exposition, because I wanted them to be thrown into it, and they were either going to go with it or they weren't. And by doing so, and yes, the saving the edit, which you so graciously sent me the link one time, and I did watch that, and it was a great video about how they saved it. I knew that it was bad when it was screened, but the fact that they got it and everybody went with it, that everybody went with that story, and everybody was okay with it without the context. And he added a little bit of context, a little bit of exposition in the prequels, but the time we needed, the most ever that we needed it, was with The Force Awakens. In fact, I have always said that the first thing they should have done is a movie to explain the 30 years. Mm-hmm. And that way, at least whatever they tried to pass off on us, they could have at least written into there, but they didn't. They just said, they're going to go with this. They're going to just have to go with this. And it was a ridiculous thought. And I do fully agree with you, everybody who says that, because context is what's needed in this. I can give it context. You can say there's no context, because either side's correct.
Look, I refuse to write the story. I refuse to write the story for them. That's not my job.
No, it isn't.
My job, I gave you my money. I walked in here. I am a consumer of the product you created. It is not my job to make what you did right. It is your job to do these characters justice from the get-go, and don't expect me to fill in the gaps for you. Write your own story and do it well, or don't expect me to pay for it.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's why I'm a part of this group. That's why you and I get along, is why we do disagree on The Last Jedi partially. I won't say fully. And I don't disagree with anything you say, truthfully, because there's no context for it. That's the problem. I went ahead and I gave it context just to make it so I could get through to the end. I want to see what they do with it. The problem is the main person who should have been there to complete this, to show everybody what the intention was, is George Lucas. They should have kept him. He should have said, if you buy this from me, I'm there until the end of this storyline. After that, it's yours. Do what you want.
Well, he was under the impression, because they bought his story treatments, that they were going to use those.
I believe that he thought that was a possibility. I don't think he was duped completely.
I think they bought his story treatment. They bought them. Of course, that's what he thought.
They wanted everything. They don't want. They never leave anything behind. That's a conversation for a different day. I'm just saying. I mean, it's good to know that. I think this is the thing that's missing, is the conversation. That's what's really missing, and that's the divide currently, is the conversation. It doesn't matter if you like the new trilogy. It doesn't matter if you don't like the new trilogy. The fact of the matter is even with the old trilogy and the prequels, conversation is what made it amicable and made it the ability that even if you didn't like what was done, because a lot of people didn't like the prequels, but they were okay with the prequels. But a lot of people love the prequels. But it was the conversation that made it okay, because nobody was hateful to each other. What's wrong with this trilogy, above all, is the fact that there have been two sides divided, and there's no amicable talking. And that is really the problem. It's because you have a valid point when you say, not my Luke, and I don't like The Last Jedi. The problem is people have bashed you and others for that opinion, but that's not how it used to be.
Right.
That's
the conversation has been essentially destroyed at this point. And so I think we need a fresh start. I don't think this is the time or place to try to fix things, because I don't believe at this point that it can be fixed. I think we need to sort of start over with a new trilogy with people who respect it, and there needs to be some measure of proof that they respect it before we can really move forward. And look, I'm absolutely going to be the one who says, I want to see things get better, because that is absolutely what I want. I want to see things improve, because I want good Star Wars stories. There's your timer. But at the end of the day, I recognize when something is irreparably broken, and sometimes you just need time to heal. And I don't know if Disney is going to give us that time.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, good. I like the timer sound.
Yeah. Okay. So we're down to just about 3 or 2.5 minutes now from when I said I'd get you off of here. So we're going to do this. So what I'd like to do is have you tell everybody again where they can find you, what you're about. Tell them about Geeks and Gamers, what you're doing over there. And then we'll go to the Wheel of Names, and then we'll be done. So I want to thank you, though, for coming on tonight. And thank you for letting me working this around your schedule, my schedule. We got it worked out. That's great. I appreciate that. And go ahead and tell everybody.
So, guys, I am Mary B., the Mistress of Mayhem, disruptor of the narrative, an official Whammon card holder, and I just recently joined the Geeks and Gamers team. So thank you so much for everybody who's just recently subscribed to my channel. I really appreciate all that, and I'm really glad to see people like Adritz and Generation Productions in the chat. I love Sith Lord, of course. He's one of my patrons over on Patreon. Noe, I love you guys so much. If I didn't call your name out, I'm sorry about that. But yes, I see you guys in the chat. I see new subscribers. I see old subscribers, and hopefully you guys will stick around here for Chris. Hit that subscribe button for him, hit the bell, and come check in with him often, because he's a wonderful, wonderful member of this fandom menace, and I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Well, thank you again. I do appreciate it, and good luck with all your endeavors. I know you're like me, again, like different reasons. My YouTube channel, I do a lot of stuff with it, but I got kids, I got everything else, but right. You are genuinely being torn in 1,000 directions, and I really appreciate your time today.
Well, you're a good friend, a longtime friend here, Chris, and if I can ever be here for you, I absolutely will be. So.
You're here for me all the time, and I appreciate that. I do want everybody to know that Mary has been there since the beginning, really, for me here, since I really got into doing YouTube. I've had this YouTube channel for 2 years. I just started this year really with it. So just a few months ago, like you said, 70-some-odd months ago. So, and you've been there every step of the way. I appreciate all your help. So ladies and gentlemen, please take your attention to the Wheel of Names right here. We're going to go ahead and spin it. and see who next week's guest hopefully will be. Depends on scheduling, as always. So here we go. Carrie Morning. So we'll have to talk with her. I know she's on the other side of the world, so the scheduling again could be an issue. So it might be an early Monday or something like that. We'll find out.
Oh, she's wonderful.
I know she is. We are at 45 minutes and 10 seconds, so I have broken my promise to you.
No. Look. If I can't handle 10 seconds in one direction or the other, then clearly I need to do a better job. So we're good.
But everybody, thank you for coming. I'm Chris Knight. This has been The Real Review 3000 and the Gospel According to Chris. Thank you again to Mary. She's a lovely person, and check her out on Geeks and Gamers and check her out on her channel. I will make sure that in the description, her link to her Twitter, where you can follow her, and the link to her YouTube page are down there as soon as I get off of here, because I forgot to do that. So sorry, Mary.
Oh, it's okay.
Everybody else, and then I didn't do it for you, and I feel horrible for it. So
it's all good, babe. No worries. Subscribe to Chris, guys.
All right, guys.
Subscribe to Sean Stackhouse.
Yes. Take it easy, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.